So I have some interesting food cards. These food cards we developed, and they have some very interesting spiritual thoughts connected to every food item.
I'll take spinach.
Okay.
I'll take the cherry.
Welcome to everyone who is here to celebrate the World Food Day 2023 with us. Water is life, water is food. This year's theme makes us think how deeply these three words are connected: water, life, and food. So I would love to welcome you all to join us for this little conversation. I know in the age of short span of attention, this is a challenge to be tuned in for an hour-long conversation, but the two guests that we have today and the amount of depth of experiences they carry with them and the beautiful conversation that you see happening between them, I'm sure you will not miss it and you will not realize that, oh, where did the 1 hour go? So please join us to welcome Dr. Vandana Shiva and Sister Jayanti. Dr. Vandana Shiva is someone who doesn't need an introduction when you talk about food systems. Vandana Shivaji is an Indian scholar, environmental activist, food sovereignty advocate, ecofeminist, and she is someone who has been not just known for her powerful voice, but her deep wisdom that comes from the roots that she recognizes herself with. Soil, not oil, staying alive, the Earth's Democracy are some of the books that she has written that has shaped the way today people think about food systems. So a very warm welcome to Vandana ji. Our second guest today is Sister Jayanti. Sister Jayanti is the additional administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris, the world's largest spiritual organization to be led by women. She is a spiritual teacher, much sought after international public speaker, author, and a visionary leader, guided by spiritual values and principles. She is also the organization's representative to the UN in Geneva since 1982. And her role within this space of UN and UN related events has been very crucial as she brings to the world the voice of the faith groups. Sister Jayanti has championed the cooperative role of spiritual organizations in creating a just and peaceful world and has brought spiritual principles to discussion tables of politicians, economists, business leaders, scientists, and nearly every stakeholder of our times. So a very interesting mix. We have Sister Jayanti and Dr. Vandana Shiva, a beautiful combination of science and spirituality coming together to bring our focus back on today's topic, that is, water is life and water is food. Welcome to you, Vandana ji. Welcome to you, Sister Jayanti.
Thank you.
And I
It
hope
always is wonderful to be with you and see you.
it's been beautiful to connect with you again, Vandanaji.
But by food, in fact, I was totally indifferent to it. I thought one could live with very little. And food concerns were very low in my priority of life. My mind was preoccupied with physics and quantum theory and non-locality till 1984. When the land, the most prosperous land of India, the state of Punjab, the land of 5 rivers, erupted in violence. And 15,000 people were killed. And that same year, thousands died when a pesticide plant leaked in the city of Bhopal. And we lost our prime minister, who was then shot. And even today, all the diplomatic issues with countries like India and Canada, actually offshoots of the violence that got expressed at that time. And my looking at agriculture began really in search of peace, in search of a non-violent system of farming. I did a book for the United Nations University called The Violence of the Green Revolution, because I understood what the context of violence was. It was chemicals, it was commodification and commercialization. It was not thinking about life on earth, the soil, the water. In fact, Punjab, the land of 5 rivers, today is a state facing a water crisis, and they predict that in a few years there will be no water in the land where water flew and the groundwater was at 10 feet high. And then in 87, I was invited to a meeting on the new biotechnologies, where the corporations were talking about the future of biotechnology. And they talked about owning the seed as their future. And I said, but you don't make the seed. Seed is the expression of creation. Seed is, how can you try and take a patent on seed? And that's when I started to save seeds. And also working with my government and parliament to make sure our laws recognize that we don't invent the seed, we don't invent plants, we don't invent animals, and simultaneously creating community seed banks all over the country and around the world. 2009 was the Copenhagen Climate Summit. And that's when I started to deeply make connections between food and climate and wrote my book, The Soil, Not Oil. And that connection is still evolving at a deeper level. Our understanding is much, much more sophisticated in terms of the ecology of climate havoc and in terms of the solutions we can offer. And finally, 2017 is when it became so clear that food is health. And our health begins in the soil. And so today, when we celebrate World Food Day, we connect all of these concerns and the way the right kind of farming and a change in the food system can bring solutions to the big problems we face, the pandemic of chronic diseases, the climate catastrophe, the species extinction. I'm so glad to be here to celebrate this day with you.
Thank you so much, Vandana ji. Sister Jayanti, would you start your monologue, maybe starting with a remark on what you heard from Vandana ji?
Om Shanti. A greeting of peace to you, my dear sister Vandana ji, and to Brother Shantanu, and to all those who are honoring World Food Day together with us today. Food, of course, is the essence of life. So much revolves around food. And attending the climate change conferences, and especially the one that you mentioned, Vandana ji, in Copenhagen, was a huge eye-opener for me. Understanding what we've done to climate, environment, and all of this, and how it impacts absolutely every part of our life. And you've mentioned so many things that are linked together. I'd like to mention two specific perspectives. One is that we are what we eat, and food that is plant-based is not only good for the environment because of less space, 1/8 of the space that's needed for meat production rather than plant production, but also water. And this year, World Food Day is honoring water as life, and also water as energy and whatever it is that brings us together in human life. And so plant-based diet actually takes up only 1/8 of the amount of water that meat-based diet takes up. And so through the years, I've come to understand that apart from the spiritual significance of non-violence of food when plant-based, but also in terms of health, which of course is such an important factor in human life, but also in terms of actual ecology. Having food that is plant-based is so very, very important. And so all three factors, whether it's spiritual, whether it's the health, or whether it's environment. But also the other thing that I've been made aware of just recently, in fact, as recently as yesterday, we've been having a conference here in Abu, and it was a summit that brought together leaders from many different perspectives. And we had a woman who runs the millet campaign, in fact, a whole movement, and she works with the Indian government And in terms of food security for the future, she was explaining how millet is the one grain that is absolutely able to flourish under desert conditions, and so needs very little water. And Vandana, you were talking about the water shortage, not only in Punjab, but generally speaking, the whole wide world, and especially India. And so millet takes up very little water, but also apparently it flourishes even in high degree temperatures into the 60s. That was something amazing for me. And so this year is being celebrated as the year of millet, and there's so many different varieties of millet. And just a very interesting anecdote, and that is that this lady was invited to produce 70 varieties of diet based on millet, which she did for the full menu. And the whole of the G20 food served was plant-based, but also where the presidents and the prime ministers stayed in hotels, of course, they had the option of choosing whichever they wanted. But out of respect for all the things that had been shared in the summit, none of them chose meat-based diet. They all chose plant-based diet. So I think it says a lot. This start for just looking at the situation about food and agriculture and how we can bring in different methods of agriculture, planting millet. I know that it thrives in Italy. I was there recently. I met a farmer who has been working with millet. So I know that it is something that people can begin to appreciate across the world. Enough said from my side. There's things that I'm sure will come up later on. But yes, it would be lovely to have a dialogue with you.
So, Vandanaji, would you like to come back on what Sister Jayanti shared?
Yeah, because, we've been working with millet since 1987, when I started to save seeds. The crops that weren't being grown in the fields at a bigger level with the Green Revolution, because the Green Revolution drove out millets. They were called primitive grains, they were called backward grains, and they were really pushed out of the diet. But in marginal areas, people were still growing it. And my sisters up in the Himalaya were still growing it. And I said, don't stop growing it. 1995, we brought out this book, Millets of India. And then we brought out a new version now with recipes of how to cook it and how to grow it. And this time we called it Bhule Bisre Anaj, the forgotten foods. Bhule Bisre used to be a program on Indian radio about Bhule Bisre Gi, the forgotten songs. So we said these are forgotten foods, which we must make future foods. And as Sister Jayanti said, it's being made future foods, which also shows you 95 to now, it's 23 years and 5 years. So 3 decades, and a decade before that, 4 decades of quiet service. And you're so right, Sister Jayanti. Millets, a big part of the water crisis, not just in India, but around the world, is chemical agriculture. Chemical agriculture needs water. 10 times more water to produce the same amount of food. That is why Punjab, which has never run out of water, growing Green Revolution rice and Green Revolution wheat, it's running out of water. But this was not their crops. Wheat was, but it was makki ki roti and sarson ka saag. It was millets, jowar, bajra. Disappear. You don't see a plant of millets anyway in the areas which have kind of become monocultures of rice and wheat. And the millets are so generous and so beautiful. They use 250 millimeters of water. But the kind of research we do in Navdanya on the ecology of the soil, the ecology of biodiversity, the ecology of producing with biodiversity, the millets give back much more to the soil. And we're doing research right now on and I hope some of you will come to the Navdanya Research and Training Farm, which we call the Earth University, because the Earth teaches us. We're doing research on how much more millets give back to the soil in terms of nutrition. Of course, my calculation 10 years ago was, if we was eating millets again, because the staple of India used to be millets, staple of Africa used to be millets. Poor Africa is eating corn, and we are eating impoverished rice and wheat because the chemical agriculture loses nutrition. All my research is showing 70 to 80% nutrition gone. But millets are nutritionally dense. Using very little water, they give us a lot of nutrition. So per unit water, they're the only kind of food that we should be growing because it provides more nourishment. Every ration shop should be having millets. Every midday meal scheme in school should be having millets. Every program of women and children, ICDS, should be having millets. So the public programs, and when people say, oh, the rich buy it, but we create a situation where khadi, which used to be the poor people's clothing, has become a rich people's clothing. Millets, which is a poor people's grain, can become a rich people's grain if we don't put it into the public feeding program. India is the country which spends the highest amount on public food programs. Those public food programs must become programs of procuring organic without chemical food, fertilizers, and procuring millets so that everywhere farmers can grow it, save their water, regenerate the soil, but most importantly, have decent incomes, because every debt of the farmer is of costly seed and costly chemicals. So we can create a debt-free society, but also a hunger-free society and a malnutrition-free society and a thirst-free society, because we built back the water. We've just done program last year. The difference in soils where we put organic matter and the soils that are putting chemical fertilizers, the difference in soil moisture was 15%. So if there's no water in the soil, and there will be no water in the soil if we've not given back organic matter, then we have a drought. And if we have climate change and the drought is more extreme, then we have a crop failure. So whether it's climate change or malnutrition, millets are really important for the future.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's a worldwide thing or just India, but certainly in India, they're honoring this year as the year of the millet. And so I think it's being pushed into the public domain, into the public eye, so that people become more and more aware of the value of millet. And of course, the other thing is that I know that we're also doing not just organic agriculture, but we're also doing what we call yogic farming. And in that, what had happened was that people in Maharashtra, when they were going through a period of drought, farmers who were already meditators decided, well, in ancient times, everything used to be done with prayer. There was nothing in which there wasn't prayer. And so what they started to do was to meditate, first on the soil as they were turning it around, then on the seeds. They would meditate on those seeds, filling them with not just the physical energy that the seed has, but filling it with spiritual energy also. And when they would go planting, the whole family would go planting, again, sharing time and meditation together. And through the period of growth and so on, everyday meditation, harvest time, again, the same. And so several universities have got interested in all of this. And so they're doing a lot of research, and they're finding more and more value and benefit, not just in the content and the nourishment of the seeds, but also of the soil itself. And I didn't know that millet had such important impact on the soil itself. So it's very valuable having to share the scientific input from you and me. But I know that from our side, we've been doing this yogic approach, and that's been highly, highly beneficial. And now it's taking place not only in Maharashtra, but several other states around India.
Yeah. Jayanti, the Year of Millets is a United Nations Year of Millets. It's for the whole world.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that means it's getting high profile across the world. Sometimes people think that millet sounds boring, and it is boring, but just imagine 70 different recipes that were created for the G20 can be made available to everyone. And so it's definitely food that can be used in banquets, not just for the, little farmer and their family, but for everyone.
And at Navdanya, we have been not just saving the seeds of millet and growing millet and doing research on millet, but as I said, this book has not just the recipes, but we used to have cafes where we realized the young people are, looking for new, as we called it, new ways with old grains. So we make pizzas with millet. We make cookies with millets. We make muffins with millet. Of course, our rotis, our kheers. There's nothing, and it's not that we are inventing the millet diet. This was the diet. It was the diet which did not destroy water, and it's the diets that can come back and be mainstream. But I think a lot of it has to do with how we were made to think. Some of the festivals we've done with millets is black is beautiful. Because why did people look down on millets? Because its flour is dark. Kali hai. Roti kali hai. Are kali hai to achhi hai na? Sabko gore hone ki zarurat nahi. Everyone doesn't have to be fair and white. And food doesn't have to be white. White sugar is not the best for health.
It's a killer.
Our gur is delicious. And it has very complex sugar molecules, so it doesn't give you all the problems. White rice, polished, again, dangerous. Refined flour, refined oils, which have removed everything that is nutritious in them. So I think it's time to not just liberate the world from its bias of monocultures, but I think it's bias of whiteness. I mean, of course, your sari is so beautiful, sister, but this idea that food must lose its different colors. In Ayurveda, they talk about eating 6 tastes in your every meal, because our gut microbiome needs all the diversity. And a simple way for people to eat diversity was to say, eat all the colors. Eat a bit of green, eat a bit of yellow, eat a bit of orange, eat a bit of white. And at the deeper level in Ayurveda, they talk about the different tastes that you must have. Because all of that is necessary for our health. And our work in Navdanya has shown how biodiversity is vital for the food system. I'm very happy to say that now the FAO and all agencies are picking this up. Our research has shown that the more biodiversity you grow per acre, the more nutrition you grow, the more water you conserve. And on our farm right now, these beautiful millet plants with the beans climbing up them. And the beans are providing nitrogen, and the millets are providing the support for the beans. Such beautiful expression of symbiosis and mutuality. And I think, you all greet, it's Om Shanti. I think a food system of Om Shanti is a food system of diversity, not using chemicals,
Absolutely.
and regenerating, conserving the soil and water while you grow the biodiversity.
2 other aspects I want to bring in before we get to Shantana's questions. One is the fact that you mentioned Ayurveda and tastes. They say that there's 14 different tastes and flavors in Ayurveda. And what happens sometimes is that there are 1 or 2 that overpower all the others and don't allow you to experience the flavor and the taste of the others. And so we discovered that if you cook without onions and garlic, you actually, because those 2 overpower the other flavors. And so if you cook without those 2 things, then the food is that much healthier and tastier also. And so that was an interesting discovery for me to know that. And the other thing is that, of course, whatever other vibrations that you prepare food with, those vibrations go into the food. You know, everybody talks about mum's cooking. And what was happening with mum's cooking, of course, was that she was cooking with love. And so she was cooking because of her love for the family and so on. And now in many places, they have apartments in which the kitchen occupies a very tiny amount of space. And if you think about a farmhouse, the olden days, where the kitchen was a kitchen where people could sit together and eat together and laugh together, so it was a community place. And you come now to the point where you have tiny little apartments with very tiny kitchens, and people just dial around and get food sent in from outside or go eat outside. And so that original idea of cooking with love and God's remembrance and then sharing food with that love, which was then very tasty, but also very healthy. Those vibrations were impacting body and soul. And that makes a big difference also, rather than just going and buying processed food and using that. And of course, the expense if you cook at home, very different to what it is if you eat outside.
Santanu, before you come in, could I just follow up with what Sister Jayanti just said? Sister, they're making apartments without kitchens now. They have a TV set, giant-sized, and next to it a microwave to heat the food you ordered. And I think this alienation from food is a very deep crisis, a spiritual crisis, but it's a health crisis, the root of the health crisis, because ultra-processed food is now identified for being responsible for 75% of the chronic diseases we are suffering from. And it's a pandemic. And whether it's for climate change or it's the health pandemic, we will have to, start growing with love again, growing food with love again. And we'll have to start bringing food back into our homes, our kitchens, our communities, and celebrating it as a sacred gift. Because it always has been a sacred gift. There's no culture that doesn't treat food as sacred. Every religion of the world has its sacrament with food, with bread. And we need to start bringing back that honoring of food again. And more importantly than anything else, realizing that bread is supposed to be shared.
Beautiful. Agree with everything you've said.
I mean, I really don't want to break this beautiful conversation between two long lost, now found friends, it seems like, because as much as I am enjoying, I'm sure all our viewers would be also enjoying this beautiful, in-depth conversation. It's not just about food, but it is also about the emotions that food naturally is able to bring out of people. It's, I think, one of the most emotive tools and most powerful tools to connect with people's heart. And that's why people say, if you want to get to somebody's heart, it goes through the track is through the stomach. But if I have to ask few questions just to bring it to the topic of this year's food day, when Jayanti, also you mentioned that water is food and water is life. My question first goes to you, Jayanti, that even in many spiritual traditions, in many religious traditions, there's a very in-depth regard for the element of water. But as you see in our present lifestyle, maybe that is being lost somewhere, and people are not thinking that how water is sacred. Yes, water gives us life, but do you think losing this aspect of sacredness from water is making us exhausted or not use it properly? What do you see is the relationship between water, spirituality, and our present lifestyle?
You're absolutely true, correct. What it is that we've totally lost contact with that which is the sacred part of life. So not just water, but it begins even with myself. We've lost contact with the spiritual being that we promise that I am. And so without that connection, then of course I lose contact with nature generally. I don't see nature as being sacred. Water, of course, is sacred. Food is sacred, and all of these things are part of nature also. And so when I begin to understand my own inner being as the being that I am, a spiritual, sacred being, then I treat you with that sanctity. And there isn't that disrespect and dishonoring or conflict that we see around us today. But it's because we don't understand that sacred aspect of life that we see all of this conflict. But of course, all that then goes further than to animals and other species. Again, we don't realize that they're sacred and they have a right to live on this planet. And what we've been doing is destroying them in one way or another, whether it's for food or whether it's BBT and all of this other stuff. And then the next is that, of course, we've actually destroyed our home because we haven't understood that aspect of sanctity again. And so water, very much part of that whole story of our relationship that has been forgotten. And yes, water is sacred. And in all spiritual ceremonies, water plays some role or another. You were right, Vandana, when you mentioned that every tradition has a role for water within its ceremonies, especially festivals and so on. And so coming back to the awareness of the being that I am, the sacred being, the soul, then I'm going to see animals, nature, water, with that vision of respect and love. And of course, because we haven't treated water with that respect, I heard, stories about Chile when 2019, COP was supposed to happen in Chile, and then it got diverted to Madrid because of the riots. But why were there riots? The riots were happening because everything within the environment had been breaking down. There was a problem with drought, but also so much of the water there had been taken over by multinational companies to produce soft drinks, fizzy drinks. I won't mention names here, but that was the reality that they were talking about. And so can you imagine a country where people are rioting because they don't have access to what should be a normal human right, water, basic, that it had been sold by the government to multinationals to produce fizzy drinks, probably more for people in the rich countries rather than the poor countries. So yes, very, very important to bring the whole aspect of that which is sacred and that which is meant to be seen with that spirit and vision of that which is benefit for life and that life depends on. And so we have to go back to those basic understandings, the fundamental principles of life.
Thank you so much, Antivan, about that. And when you say bringing back into our practice, bringing back into our awareness that not just the water is sacred, I am also sacred. And this awareness helps me to treat everyone with a lot of reverence, a lot of respect. Mm, Connecting this question to you, Vandanaji, you see there, when you were sharing about the connection between growing millets and growing organically, how it adds more water into the soil moisture, and it is also bringing back water. You said build back water. Do you think, as a common person, maybe an IT engineer or somebody living and sitting all the time in front of a computer, living in an urban environment, do I have a role to play in this building back
I think
water?
everyone who is alive because of food and water. And therefore, each of us, no matter where we live, has a duty to respect water and respect food and to support the systems that regenerate life on earth, conserve water, conserve soil, conserve biodiversity. Sister Jayanti talked about the Chilean riots. Now, in 2002, I was invited to a little village in Kerala called Plachimata. And it's tribal women who called me for Earth Day. And I went because, they were resisting the fizzy drink giants who were mining 1.5 liters per day. And they left a water famine. And the women were walking 10 miles to get water. They said, we had enough water in our wells. And now we are walking 10 miles. How much further can we walk? Now we must stop and stop this company. And they started the satyagraha, the action that comes from love and the power of truth. Gandhi's word for not cooperating with something that's destructive. And 2 years later, we all worked together. I supported them with mobilization. I supported them with, legal cases. And more importantly, if I had more room on my wall, I'd have a poster called Pepsi Quit India, because they actually take 10 times more water out of the community than they put in the fizzy drink or in the water bottle. But then the fizzy drink then gives you diabetes, creates obesity. So everyone is losing except the giants. I do think everyone could be in IT, could be in finance, no matter what you're doing. You eat and you drink. You can eat and drink with consciousness. And because you're in an extremely privileged place, you earn a lot if you're in IT and you earn a lot if you're in the financial world. First and foremost, put that money to taking care of your health and eat with consciousness. But I would, we are very fortunate because we do this 1 month course on regeneration, on return to earth, growing food in ways that actually regenerates the earth rather than degenerates her. And the same applies for human health. And we get a lot of IT and finance people because, those careers bring you a lot of money, but they sap you. And these young people who've made lots and lots of money are getting burnt out very early. And so many of them want to now become organic farmers, and they come to us to learn, and they do. I think one of the things I should do is somehow make a list of everyone who's become an organic farmer, having been in another profession earlier. So I think eating with consciousness, drinking with consciousness, realizing we are not individuals who are merely consumers, realizing we are part of an earth family, that we are a part of a community, always keeping in mind what's happening to others through my consumption. Am I part of ensuring that everyone has food and water? Or am I part of the deprivation that is causing hunger and thirst? And we all can be part of the solution. And it doesn't matter where you live. You could be in a high rise, but what you eat and drink is not shaped by the high rise. It's shaped by your consciousness. So let your consciousness guide your everyday life.
Wow.
Beautifully
So,
put.
yeah, I was just about to, bring this word consciousness back to you, Sister Jayanti, because somehow I believe that yes, Vandanaji is right that if I am conscious, I will choose better. But what about my habits? Because sometimes my habits are so powerful that I'm not able to, make a shift. How do you comment on that?
I think that once you can try it in a very gentle way, try eating food that is very tasty, but is also plant-based. And if you do that, then very quickly you learn that your palate is being tickled by many other different tastes, and the old habits can pass away very quickly. And so that's one gentle way to approach it. And the other way to approach it is absolutely pure logic. Do I want the human species to survive? Do I want the planet to continue? And if I do, then I have to make a switch. And I cannot continue with old habits and old lifestyles anymore. I think climate change is now not a figment of a few scientists' imagination. It's demonstrated that it's very, very real. And the tragedies that happen through climate change are really very, very sad. And we're seeing more and more of this across the world, and not just in the south, but we're also seeing things happen in the north, the wildfires in Canada, in Europe, in Greece, especially we see in many different aspects, floods happening. So people, I think, are now ready to listen and to understand that if I want to contribute in a positive way, yes, as Vandanaji said, with consciousness, how am I living my life? What are the choices I'm making? And maybe I'm not just thinking about myself, but I'm thinking about the future generations to come. And so, can I think about the future and not just have the selfishness of what I like and what I want, but rather to think about my human family? And there's this lovely slogan that's been, it was actually again taken up in the G20, but of course it's been around for centuries in India, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, and it means we are one family. And of course, people have forgotten this. And so when water comes in one side of the boat, I can't say sitting on the other side of the boat, it's never going to reach me. The water is going to come creeping in, and it's definitely going to reach me also, and it's already doing that. So I think that when people understand that they can make a conscious choice to contribute either to well-being or to further disaster, I think they'll begin to think in the right way and make the right choices.
Many of my questions you already shared in your answers, but if there is hope that you see in the present system, in the present food system, in the present system of consumption, do you see still there is some hope? And what are those points of hope that you can see? This is a common question for both of you.
Yeah. When you say the present food system, there are many food systems. There's an ecological system, there's a local system, there's a biodiverse system, and then there's an industrial system, which is based totally on fossil fuels and fossil chemicals. And it's a globalized system based only on profits and trade and commodification. There's a corporate system where the corporation should shape the rules. They wrote the rules of the World Trade Organization. And that's why, on the one hand, there's so much more emissions. 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from an industrial globalized food system. 75% diseases come from an ultra-processed food system, which has been spread all over the world. We weren't eating junk food in India till 1995. It wasn't allowed. Our laws didn't allow it. Our laws required that food, even when processed, be cooked with love and care. Therefore, it was kept in the cottage industry, as it was called, where women did most of the processing. And then, of course, the big junk food industry entered. But as the other system, it never got extinguished. Even today, 80% of the food we eat comes from small farms. This is FAO telling us this. Small farms that are less than 20% of the land. And most farmers of the world are women. They're giving us food. But it's not just human beings. Sister Jayanti talked about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. I've been talking this language ever since I started ecological work, for 50 years. And I wrote a whole book called Earth Democracy. What would the democracy of the earth look like if we treated the earth as a family? And my work over the last 4 decades on the food issue has told me that actually we need to give up our human arrogance. That we are, of course, eaters, but we are not the only producers. Our research in Navdanya shows that 1/3 of the food we eat comes from the pollinators that pollinate our crops. Huge amounts comes from the soil organisms, the mycorrhizal fungi, the earthworms. So you have to feed them. You can't spray poisons on them and drive them to extinction. So all beings, or the whole earth family, comes into play to produce the food. And the food is for all. In India, the women make rangoli on their doorstep for rice flour to feed the ants. In the tribal areas where rice evolved, and behind me is the Annapurna, holding sugarcane, which evolved in India, and rice, which evolved in India. And in the areas of Chhattisgarh and Orissa, where rice evolved, where we have an amazing seed banks of rice, the women make these beautiful decorations. And I thought there'd been a festival. So I said, what festival did you have that you made these beautiful decorations? And the women just turn around and say, no, this is for the birds when there's no rice in the fields. We are a civilization that knows that food is for all. Food is our connector. Food is a currency. Food is sacred. And with that, we can make sure that no one goes hungry, no being goes hungry, no child goes hungry, no poor person goes hungry. The earth's capacity is there, the human capacity is there. We just have to stop the bad habits. And bad habits are meant to be stopped. Good habits are meant to be cultivated.
One further thing I just want to add, within some societies, and it's not north or south, but it's within a certain cultural level, it's considered light to leave food on your plate. And my mother used to teach us, and she was a yogi, and she told us every little bit of food that you take, you must eat. Otherwise, you're starving somebody else. And who knows, with the law of karma, whether it's going to come back to you and you'll find yourself starving one day. And so she, take as much as you want, but only take what you're going to eat. It mustn't get thrown. And so that's been something on a very simple level that I've observed forever and ever. But multiply that in a bigger scale, and where in some societies, so much food is wasted. People go buy, and they stock up their fridges, and at the end of the week, there's still a huge amount that's left, and of course it gets thrown away. And in the system where even natural foods that don't necessarily have a sell-by date, are given a little sticker now that has to be consumed by such and such a date. And it may be so, may not be so, but then it's considered out of date and so on. So the whole system that we have in which food waste is acceptable, we need to change this consciousness, this mindset, and say, no, it's not a good idea for waste. We need food much more. There's enough for everyone's need, but there'll never be enough for anyone's greed. And so I think that one thing that we can do to improve things immediately within the family, within our community, is create this awareness. You must not waste food. That would be.
One message that Jayanti gives is to really see if I am consuming what I have taken or I am responsible for wasting it. And the message that I pick up from Dr. Vandana is that give up your bad habits, give up your arrogance, because that is the root cause of all the suffering that others are going to suffer, and maybe in future I'll be suffering. So just last question for both of you. When Vandanaji, you picked up the book called Bhule Bisre Anaj, The Forgotten Food, I wanted to ask you, what is that one food item or a dish from your childhood that you really think is a very good solution if people go back to that dish? And same question to Jayantiman as well.
In a very interesting way, khichdi has been my favorite since childhood and stays my favorite, not only because it's so simple to make, but it's so nourishing to eat. And the beautiful thing is, khichdi is the food you eat when you're sick and you can't digest anything else. Khichdi is what you make at Pongal, at every festival. So it's the highest celebration of food and the food that takes care of you. It's a comfort food and a sacred food.
Very nice. What about you, Jayantiman?
For me, my staple diet is dal. I'm the simplest of all, dal, moong dal. But yeah, I'm easy. And as you said at the beginning, that food wasn't a fixation for her. But of course, the value of it can't be underestimated. The same for me. I don't put that as a priority. And I love fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, everything that nature provides. Really beautiful. I appreciate it greatly.
If you had to pick one fruit or a vegetable that you think is also quite close to your own nature, which would be that one fruit or vegetable?
Mango.
Oh, and why
Even
so?
for me, mango. And we have 9 varieties of mango at the Navdanya farm. It's beautiful. The taste of and mango has emerged from, has been domesticated in India, Mangofera indica. So yeah, it's such a delicious crop.
So what does makes mango so special for you, Jayantiben?
the fragrance, the flavor, the sweetness, and the nourishment it gives. You really feel very content and full.
So I have some interesting food cards. These food cards we developed, and they have some very interesting spiritual thoughts connected to every food item. If I want you to choose one from, uh, I'm just sharing some names of the food items, and you pick them: cabbage, tomato, cauliflower, cherry, spinach, pumpkin, apple.
I'll take spinach.
Okay. So let me read what spinach says for you. Vandanaji, you are rich and deep, like spinach. You are concentrated. Your concentrated goodness brings strength and vigor to all you meet. So you are absolutely like a spinach, deep and rich. For you, gentlemen.
I'll take the cherry.
So, Sister Jayanti, you are contented. Like the cherry, you have everything you need within you. Contentment makes you stable and you bring comfort to others around you. So, so these cards are something that we all thought about, that not just eating these food items, but thinking deeply about those, how this food item becomes part of me and how I start reflecting on such food varieties. On the verge of a goodbye to our audience, if there is one thing that you would ask them to do that you are doing personally in your life, and what benefit that activity has done to you, what would be that one message?
For me, it would be gratitude. To be grateful for life, to be grateful for the sunshine, to be grateful for the food, the water. The attitude of gratitude is such a very blessing to have in life. And so just move along with gratitude at all times.
So, Vandanaji, one thing that you have been doing in your personal life that you can ask others to adopt.
The same as Sister Jayanti, I just describe it in a scientific language. The law of return, the law of giving back, which is gratitude, giving back to the soil, or the part of what the soil has given you, and the plant and the earths have given you. That's organic farming. That is taking care of the future. That's taking care of the food and water for all. And it's gratitude.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. I know we have run a little bit above the time.
It's been beautiful to connect with you again, Vandanaji. And
it always is wonderful to be with you and see you. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
I hope we connect personally soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Om Shanti. And thank you, Shantanabai, for bringing us
Thank you,
together.
Shantanu.
Dear friends, I hope this conversation has left you thinking about few little things that you can do. There is so many things that we can really do, but what is meaningful is that we start. You can start with what Sister Jayanti said, to become more and more conscious and lead a life of gratitude, to start taking time to think about the sacredness of everything that I am surrounded with. Or you can start with what Vandanaji shared, that you are not just a consumer, you are a conscious consumer. When I let go of my arrogance, when I let go of my bad habits, I become a conscious consumer. I'm able to make a big difference. And both of them had many powerful messages, whether it is to do with millets, whether it is to do with nutritional and delicious modern takes on ancient food grains that are millets, or whether it was to do with water, the way I see my relationship with water, the choices that I make every day. A lot to take. Please do take something from this and let us know how this journey began. One thing that you also learned was that we had very interesting food cards that we played with. You can also play with these food cards, and they are available on our website to download. You can download them from the link below, and you can also download them from our website. The website is www.foodcareinitiatives.org. Use them. There's a beautiful toolkit which is there, which you can use for your parties, for your events, for your workshops, for your gatherings, and make every gathering a very meaningful gathering, a gathering that take cares of each other while taking care of the food. In the website, we also have some meditations, some reflections that can help you connect with more in-depth heart with the food system. So do use the website well and enjoy having a visit. So thank you so much once again for joining us to celebrate the World Food Day 2023. Water is life, water is food.